Welcome to Sign for the Times. The Society for the Involvement of Good Neighbours, commonly known as SIGN, is a not-for-profit agency in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, Canada, that provides 24 social and community programs and services that fulfill its mission, provide leadership, programs and services that assist, support, and empower children, adults, and families to achieve lifelong success. SIGN believes that will lead to strong and caring citizens and communities. Our podcasts explore those programs and include conversations with those closely involved with SIGN and people who have used, in some instances, the services of SIGN. My name is Dick DeRyk. Encouraging and enabling youth to become more involved in the community and promoting their well-being are among the focuses of a new project of SIGN, Youth Resilience, we call it. It grew out of SIGN's realization that there's a need to provide more proactive and preventive ways to increase the mental well-being, decrease substance abuse, and reduce negative behavior among young people. To do that, the project intends to work with youth ages 12 to 18 to build resilience and involve young people in activities and decision-making in Yorkton. Part of SIGN's Life Skills program, the project is led by Darren tonight, the newly hired community youth worker. Darren is far from new to working with youth. He retired several years ago from a career in education here in Yorkton and in Moose Jaw that included being a teacher, principal, and superintendent in the education systems. This doesn't look much like retirement, Darren. I'm guessing that something convinced you that you weren't quite ready for the rocking chair yet. What motivated you to take on this project?
Well, Dick, you're absolutely right. I did retire from the education sector, but I wasn't done working with kids or wanting to help within the community. I'd spent the last few years in Moose Jaw and had been traveling back and forth and come home here to Yorkton. And my wife is still working, and I knew I just wanted to spend some more time either helping out in the schools or doing something in the community around youth. And I saw this position come along, and it encompassed, a lot of the things that I believe in, a lot of the things that are important to our youth, and the framework, which we'll talk about a little bit later around the 40 developmental assets, really caught my eye because I had utilized that when I was in the school setting.
At the present time, this is a 2-year project. Tell us about the project. What's going to happen? You're new to this. I'm guessing that you're doing some organizational work just to get things established to start with. But what will people in the community, and especially the young people, what will they see happening over the fall and into the winter?
I guess what is going to happen, even though it's a 2-year project, the intent is to create the processes so that this will continue on well beyond 2 years. The 40 developmental assets are not new to Yorkton. SIGN and Andrew Sedley had done a lot of work about 8 to 10 years ago around this and engaged a number of our community-based organizations with this. And so when this funding came along to rejuvenate, I guess, the developmental assets and to help support youth and their resiliency, it's just an opportunity to connect with those community-based partners, to connect with businesses, to connect with schools, to bring it together. The core of this is it takes a community to raise a child. And the idea that we're all in this together, whether we're, a few months old or, a few months away from our 100th birthday, we're all community members of Yorkton. And so the work that's going to be happening coming up in the short term is I've got a commitment from both school divisions. So I'm going to be working in the schools, working with youth 12 and up to help sell the message of assets and to also connect with some of these youth. And if I can somehow support connecting with some of our agencies, do so. The long-term plan is to create a youth committee, 2 youth committees actually, to provide feedback to our community, in which we'll create a community action plan. So we've got what's called a Yorkton Alliance of Asset Champions group, and that's made up of a number of community-based organizations, some ministry organizations, and I'm going to be also knocking on the doors of some of our civic leaders. And more importantly, that committee is going to be made up of youth. And so my first step is to engage the youth by being out in the schools and trying to gather a diverse group of youth to provide feedback to this committee so that we can continue to work together to provide good opportunities for all citizens, but to see our youth as a resource in our community. They really, really are, and they have so much to offer.
Let's back up a minute, because I see and I hear the term developmental assets used when it comes to youth resilience and empowerment. I hear the number 40 associated with that. Obviously, there is kind of an accepted model there called developmental assets. What exactly is that? Where did this come from, and what exactly is it? Because that's a term that educators may be familiar with. People maybe who work with youth. For the rest of us, it's not all that clear exactly what that might be.
So the Search Institute, which is based out of Minneapolis in the States, has done quite a bit of intensive research, and what they have discovered there are 40 developmental assets that are building blocks of healthy development that help young people grow up to be healthy, caring, and responsible. And they've identified 20 external assets, and they're kind of framed into four kind of categories. So there's the support category. So youth that have a lot of support, whether that's family, other adult relationships, caring neighborhoods, caring school climate, seem to do better. Then there's the empowerment category, which includes the community values youth. And that's why part of this project is encompassing all the community. So the community is seeing the value in youth. Youth as resources and service to others. So they're just not a standby, but they are a resource to our community. And then there's boundaries and expectations. So we know that to be a healthy adult, we understand boundaries and we understand expectations, and we find that youth as well that have those assets do better. And then finally, constructive use of time category. And so there's 40 of those external development assets that we can help build. And what the research has shown through the Search Institute is the more assets that youth have, the more they're going to engage in positive activities, and the least likely that they're going to engage in risk behaviors. The other thing that will happen is as we develop those external assets, the youth begin to develop good, solid internal assets. And there's four categories there. So there's the commitment to learning. There's positive values, social competencies, and positive identity. And so the Search Institute has created a survey, which I will be putting out in the spring for our youth, in which they'll be doing this and identifying the assets that they have. And it's a really good framework, because from my experience, when we implemented this, when I was a principal in the school setting, we could see that those youth that had more assets did engage in better activities. And the positive thing is, as we began to build the assets in some of our students with greater needs or at higher risk, we began to see those good choices happening and a reduction in risky activities, drug and alcohol abuse, trouble with the law. What was really critical at that time, though, was that wasn't just a school. That was involvement of RCMP. That was involvement of community-based organizations like Boys and Girls Club. That was encompassing things like social services. So it really encompassed a wide variety of folks there helping support. And we tracked the assets that the kids were building and developing over their time at school, and we could see those changes happening. And so the thing that I like about this, because I'm an educator at heart, it's got to be research based, right? And that's the beauty of this program, is it isn't just here's a great thing to do, and it'll make you feel better in the community. The research points out that if we implement this as a community, and if we support our youth, and if we look at our youth as resources and valued members of our community, they are going to engage in the things that we hope they engage in and stay away from the things we hope they stay away from.
Has it been found, the Research Institute and the people that have done this, is there a connection between the ones that develop these assets and other kids who may be?
Absolutely. Part of those internal assets is having that positive identity. And so what you'll typically see is some of our youth that already have a number of assets developed because of the supports that they've always had are our leaders. But leadership isn't deemed to a certain group of people with assets. A lot of times it comes to that identity and having the confidence to be able to speak to the things that you believe in. Positive identity is built upon, our environment and the support that we can have. And so, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes all it takes is one adult to be a good, solid mentor to provide that confidence to youth. I taught middle years kids for years. That was my area. And so I've recognized how they go through that change of being children to wanting that independence, but not having the confidence to always make the right choices because some of the support systems weren't always there. And yet, amazing leaders. We have amazing leaders who, I've been around now for over 30 years in education, while those leaders that I saw in middle year school are leaders in our community now.
Yeah.
And part of that is we just want to, if we recognize we can do more, it comes down to creating those strong, caring citizens.
This is not, as you alluded to and mentioned, actually, not something that is just a sign thing. Obviously, you need the support of other organizations in the community who all will be kind of partaking in this in various ways.
Well, I've reached out previously there was an alliance of asset champions. So there was a number of people that were engaged, or a number of community organizations that were engaged in the past. So that would be our school systems, that would be Boys and Girls Club, that would be the city of Yorkton, their community and recreation department, the library, different folks like that. And so I've reached out to the folks that have been involved in the past, and because it was such a positive experience, right now I have, I believe, 15 of those organizations coming back to sit on the asset of Alliance Champions, which is really exciting. What I want to do is broaden that out, though. Our business community is huge within the city, and our business leaders, that word in and itself, are an absolute necessary resource to help supporting our youth within the city. So, reaching out to the business community, and I hope I'm going down to be trained in providing community presentations here in the next couple of weeks. My hope is to be able to come out and give some presentations to business, polish up my presentation a little bit with some updated resources that Search Institute has, and the data that they have, because they've got new data, just to encourage people to join this. I came back out of retirement because I really believe in the power of the assets, and I believe in what the power of our youth and what they offer our community. Yorkton is such a great place to live. We have so many amazing people doing amazing things that here is just another opportunity to, I believe, strengthen our community when we're coming out of a really difficult time in the pandemic world.
Well, exactly. I mean, the last year, almost 2 years now, hasn't been easy.
No, it hasn't, and so I had actually retired last year at the end of June, and then came back for a little stint back into the education sector. And one of the things that I realized was the impact that the pandemic was having on our families and our youth. So conversations that I had never had previous in my 30 years, I was having, and struggles that we were having with, families trying to to deal with the fact that we have, a pandemic going on, and life as we've known it had significantly changed. And so, same for our youth. Like the world 2 years ago versus the world now, the pandemic has changed, and it's going to take a community to help support ourselves as we heal to come back and into a strong community.
For youth, obviously, the whole education system, has been upset by this. But beyond that, has it impacted youth as far as kind of their own social life, their ability to find part-time work? What has that impact been?
Well,
I think on that?
Yeah, I think it's had all of that. One of the biggest things, from my experience as a teacher, is you build these things on positive relationships. And so you build them upon sometimes the things that aren't academic in school, because school is more than just, a place where you learn. It's our core function, but those relationships and that you build with your youth or with the students, is kind of gone missing these last couple of years. It's come back a little bit in this fall, but our youth, our middle years kids, our high school kids, their social connections has been changed so significantly. And that is a big part of being, a middle years, a high school kid is those connections that you have with your friends and with your the other adults in your life. And so I would say that fabric has really taken, in my experience, a bit of a hit during this pandemic.
There is sometimes I run into it talking to people of the older generation, let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. There is a skepticism sometimes I hear that kids really, aren't really interested in getting involved in the community, right? That they're interested in their own circle, their own little, the groups that they associate with. What's your experience with that? I'm guessing you're going to say that's a misconception.
I think it is, because I think you can pick and choose. I would say I'm part of that older generation now too. And I have friends and colleagues that disengage from the community at times, right? Yeah. And so it's easy, it's easy to generalize, but it's not fair to generalize, because we have so many youth. And I think you picked on the really good point when you said they see things differently. Well, of course they do. Right? Our youth in our community, are our future, and they do have different interests, and they do have different thoughts. And I think that's the beauty of this. If we take a look at this as a strength based in an opportunity to tap into something, a generation that is different. The thing I loved about education was it was 90% positive when you were working with kids, and 10% it was a rough day, Yeah. And so, I spent a career that was 90% really, really good stuff. And our youth have so much to offer, and they need to be mentored to learn how to be volunteers, to learn how to give, to learn how empathy works, to understand those social competencies, and to build their positive identity, and in return, we as the adults can embrace that same sort of thing. I've learned so much from working with youth. I've gained an appreciation of enthusiasm. Every single day there's enthusiasm that comes around, and some really creative ideas. If you just open your mind.
I guess the flip side of that is the established community, the older community. Is it ready to welcome, youth into the decision-making process? And you're going to engage, obviously that's one of the things you're going to engage them about, because that needs to be tackled. I mean, if you have the youth ready to take part, and the older generation or the established part of, the older community says, no, they don't need to be here, then you're not getting anywhere.
No, I hope they are. And I know, like, one of the challenges is to ensure that we give youth an authentic voice, right? Because if it isn't authentic, if we're just, going to listen to them and say, oh, wasn't that nice? We sat around the table, then we're defeating the purpose. I look around our community, and things like our golf courses, things like our curling clubs, things like our businesses are going to rely upon our youth, right? And that is, you take a look in your service world, those are your clients. Now they might be, they might be a few years away, but if you tag them in to something that is good, and you make them, and you see it as something good, or you make it welcoming. I grew up in a really small town, and the curling club was the most welcoming place because all of the adults knew that was the only way that the curling club was ever going to survive. It wasn't going to survive only with the adults. And that meant, sometimes you had to deal with, 15 or 16-year-olds maybe doing things a little bit different etiquettely, but then working and respectfully engaging in them to help build that. And so I just see an opportunity here that if we look down the road past this year or next year and think about things long term, and you think about the opportunities to engage our youth so that we've got them, it's going to bring us a stronger community. It's going to mean it's going to be more engaging for all of the citizens, and it can lead to nothing but positive things for the city of Yorkton.
So I'm guessing once you get your presentation polished up after the education session that you yourself are going to, that there's going to be organizations, adult organizations and civic organizations that are going to hear from you and say, look, there's something I want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the exciting things is I've been out, like I said, to some of the schools and some of these organizations, and they want me there already. I'm just saying, just hold off, because you think things are good now. Well, they're going to be even better once I get polished here. So one of the things that I can do is I can talk. I want to be able to make sure I've got all my facts straight to the to the most current research. Yeah. One of the really interesting things that I looked at when I got all of the old resources, and this was 10 years ago. One of the big things that's changed in our society is 10 years ago, when I go through all of this resource, there's no any information on cell phones or social media, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, you talk about how things have changed in 10 years.
Yeah.
So, that is a big part of our world now. And it's going to be a big part to how we address it, because it's a big part of our youth's world. I have 3 of my own kids, and they do circles around their dad when it comes to technology. And I've always considered myself somewhat tech savvy and comfortable with it, but not to the extent that my adult children are.
Yeah. No, true enough. I think we've all kind of associate with that. You mentioned a survey among students in the spring. What's the purpose of the survey? What do you hope to get out of that?
So the survey is called the Attitudes and Behaviour Survey, and it's from the Search Institute. It's a 30-minute online survey, which will give us as a community for this Alliance of Asset Champions.
So we're not doing it the old-fashioned way by checking off boxes on paper?
No. That, in fact, you talk about things that have changed in 10 years. That's the way it was. It's an online survey, but it will give us an idea of where our community stands in regards to where our youth have for, their assets. So it's a very unassuming survey, but the responses that youth give provide that insight to where the strengths are. Do we have a community that has our youth feel that they're supported? Do they feel they have positive values, or are there some areas where typically our youth are lacking? And so that will allow us to create a community profile with that Alliance of Asset Champions. And then the idea is to start creating a community plan. So how do we address this? And how do we build every asset that we can build in a youth? Just leads to good things without taking a guess, because we all have, we can observe these things, but it doesn't necessarily mean our observations are accurate to how the youth internalize it. So again, it goes back to, I'm a research guy, I'm a data guy. You can't create a good plan without good data. And so this survey will provide us with data. What it will also do, I'm hoping, is each individual school. So we'll do this survey in the schools. And I've offered every school that opportunity to get their individual data, because some of the schools in and themselves want to do a lot of work around, building assets. Each school has to have a mental health learning improvement plan goal as mandated by the ministry this year. And that will probably move into next year. And so here's a really good way for our schools to identify strengths and weaknesses with assets and begin to build some of those positive relationships to build assets. One of the things I have learned, and it was a good reminder, I've been out visiting with schools. There's lots of really good community leadership groups happening in each school. And so I hope to tap into that work and bring some of those leadership. So we've got eight elementary schools here in town. Tap into some of those leadership groups and bring a diverse group of students together. COVID hopefully will allow me to do that and allow them to come together and provide feedback around some of this information, because our youth will have a different interpretation of those results than the adults will.
Yes, I imagine that will be the case. This has been a good introduction. Lots of information for people to think about. We will need to follow up with this as we go along. So I'm guessing that you and I will be talking again, perhaps again in the winter and in the spring as this project goes forward. I wonder, I've had kids and grandkids, now great-grandkids, but I wonder how much the parents are aware of this type of project, whether the kids take it home. And I think it's obviously important for the whole process for the parents to be aware, not only aware of it, but supportive of what you're trying to do.
I know the last time around when I was involved in the schools, we did a lot of work with our families to share this information because, at the end of the day, it's their children.
Yeah.
And so if they understand, the idea of the developmental assets and how you can build that, I think one of them is family structure and family support. And family support can look many different ways. It's how it's internalized by the youth or by the child. It's just good resources to share with the family. So, part of my work being in the schools, once I get the new updated information, will be to share that with administrators. So if they choose to share more information for families, my experience is some families embrace it and some don't. And but sharing the information and sharing the message of assets is just really incredible, because every asset that we build in every youth moves us in a positive direction.
Thanks, Darren, for this conversation. We will no doubt, as I said, talk again. We do need to give credit where due. The Morris Foundation is providing funding for the first 2 years of this project. The foundation is managed by the family of George and Helen Morris. George Morris was an inventor of the Morris rod weeder and established his company, later called Morris Industries, in Yorkton in 1949. And Sign is grateful to the Morris Foundation for the support that they're providing for this particular project. New Sign for the Times podcasts are published regularly. In upcoming podcasts, we will talk with those who have been assisted by Sign's various programs and with the program managers and staff who provide that assistance. If you have comments or suggestions, please feel free to email communications@signyorkton.ca or use the contact options on our website at www.signyorkton.ca. We are also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at Sign Yorkton. Thanks for listening, and we will talk again soon.